Welcome back, folks, to another episode of The Secret Origins of Mint Condition. I'm your host, Joe, and everyone knows who's ever visited a comic book store, shop, your local LCS, knows there's always one corner that draws you in, piques your interest, and keeps you coming back for more. Well, hopefully this third segment of Joe's Comics Corner will do that for you. And to help me with that, we have joining me tonight a frequent guest of the show, a friend of the show, and fastest comic book reader alive, Keith Tarnowski. So, Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. How are you tonight?
I'm pretty good, and I know we got something special for our friends. So, would you like to tell them what we got planned tonight for them?
Yes, today we are going to be discussing, in my opinion, one of the top three runs on The Flash, the fastest man alive. In my opinion, the top three writers of runs is Mark Waid, Carrie Bates, and Geoff Johns. So today we are going to be doing a deep dive into Geoff Johns' first run of The Flash, starring Wally West from the early 2000s.
Okay, so how many issues did Geoff write of the Flash with specials and Secret Origins and whatnot? But it was about five. It was about a 5-year run, right?
I think around 62 issues. Yeah,
Wow.
It ended. It started in 2001, ended in around 05, right in the smack dab in the middle of Infinite Crisis, actually.
Cool. All right. So I was thinking about this. I just recently, as you know, we've spoken offline about this. I just recently completed his run, which I think started with issue. I have it over here somewhere. 164. Right. Yeah. So 164 to 225 was the entire run, and of course there were specials, annuals. I think there was even a Worlds at War special in there, wasn't there?
Actually, there wasn't not an annual. There was the Secret Files and
Mm-hmm.
Our Worlds at War, who the artist of the first arc, Angel Unzida,
Yeah.
penciled, and there was a Flash Superman DC first issue that
Okay.
tied into the run. And I believe that was it. Those were and Iron Heights, which is the prestige format one
Yes.
shot introducing the new rogues.
Mm-hmm.
And that was drawn by Ethan Van Sciver from
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
Gorgeous
Gorgeous
book.
comic.
So yeah, those were all of the issues that comprised. It wasn't published everywhere, but there was also the Wizard half issue that you had to order from Wizard magazine, which was a prelude to the final arc of the run,
Mm-hmm.
Rogue War.
Yeah, I remember you telling me to read that when I told you I was reading the whole run. I completely forgot to pull it out of the box.
Well, I'll tell you,
When you advised me, I went and grabbed it.
it's collected in the final trade paperback, and it's probably, I would assume, it's in the Geoff Johns Flash run omnibuses, but it's definitely in that Rogue War trade paperback.
Okay, so now you mentioned at the beginning that you thought Johns was in the top three, and you mentioned Mark Waid and Carrie Bates, and I would completely agree with that. But since Carrie Bates was some years before, we'll push him to the side for now. But Mark Waid preceded Geoff Johns on the Flash. So, what do you think is the difference? What's so unique about Johns' run as compared to Mark Waid's run?
Well, Mark Waid's run, which is my favorite run on the Flash, my favorite run period in comics, is basically more of a focus on Wally West. Mark Waid took what was given before him by Bill Messner Loeb, and even to a certain degree Mark Wolfman and the previous Flash writers, and he just kind of grew from there, but really focused on Wally. And he's very known and famously has said many times that he basically, to a certain degree, gave Wally West his personality. The book is Waid's run is very focused on Wally and the Flash family, as well as his relationship with Linda Park. It's basically him and Linda are essential to the run.
Mm.
And now, while Geoff Johns' run is, while he writes Wally and Linda both very well, especially their love story as well, but his focus is more on the plot and especially on the rogues. He really fleshed them out more than any writer in Flash history, even more than Carrie Bates.
Oh yeah, I mean those rogue they were called rogue profiles, correct?
Yeah, the rogue profile issues he sprinkled throughout the run. It would always be like 5 or 6 issues before the arc that would be pertinent to their story. So new readers, especially, would get an idea who these characters were, and old readers got a more in-depth, kind of a grittier, origin story, if you will, of the character. I always think I believe that Geoff Johns, I would bet money on it, took inspiration from James Robinson's Starman with respect to the rogue profile issues, because Robinson's Starman's book had these times past
The
issues.
time's passed. That's right. I forgot that. Yes.
Yeah, and they would always be like they'd be pertinent to an upcoming Starman story. A lot of times they'd be an origin story, like a Will Payton, but a lot of times it might just be, how Ted and Alan Scott and them killed the ragdoll, and how later he came back from the dead and was haunting Jack or something like that. Figuratively, he wasn't a ghost. Um, so I always say that I believe he got inspiration from James Robinson on that, because they were good friends, and James Robinson was a mentor to Geoff in the beginning.
Yeah. Was it James Robinson and Geoff Johns who launched the JSA book, or was that another writer?
Interesting. It was Dave. It was David Goyer and James Robinson are credited on the first few issues,
Right.
including the secret files that launched the book.
Mm-hmm.
But around issue 4 or 5, John's name also popped in.
Yes,
on there.
I don't remember that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I read interviews with both Robinson and Johns. Johns was there from the beginning, but he was more like, he was early in his career. He'd only done Stargirl at that point.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So he was learning the trade. The rogue profiles is such a great marketing tool by the editorial staff at the time to get, to put these rogues front and center, to give you their origins in a one and done comic book, something you don't get anymore today. Everything has to go on forever. No. So, and if I'm not mistaken, was Joey Cavalieri, I should know how to pronounce his name. I worked with him for many years at Barnes & Noble on 18th Street. But was he the editor for most of the run?
Yeah, he was the editor for most of the run. In fact, he was even the editor, and when the run ended, before Infinite Crisis, there was even the final arc after Geoff Johns' run. It was actually even written by
Joey wrote those. Yeah, because I remember earlier he had a run on Justice League of America, the original Volume 1, and he wrote the final, I want to say, year or so of that book. Before that book got canceled, right before the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Yes, I did work with Joey for many years at 105.
That's great. That's so cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah, at the time I didn't know Joey was interning at DC Comics. Wish I would have known. Who knows? But Joey was a nice guy. Very nice guy.
What was your favorite rogue profile issue? Yeah, if you had to pick one.
Well, the most disturbing one, I think, is Mirror Master, because with that final page where he's literally doing lines on the mirror in the bathroom.
Yep. Slimeball character. Yeah.
Yeah. Real slimeball. I mean, of all of them, really much so. But I would think Captain Cold. I enjoyed that, and it also another disturbing one was, of course, Rory's heat wave. He burned down his house and his orphanage. Correct?
Yep.
Oh, God,
that was a good one. I kind of forgot about that one.
That makes your skin crawl. So these were not the Barry's rogues. Some of them weren't, literally, because some of them had passed away. Obviously,
Mirror Master. That was the Mirror Master, Evan McCullough, that was created by
Scudder, right? Yeah, exactly. So, but Barry's rogues were Silver Age, early Bronze Age rogues, just interested in robbing jewelry stores and knocking over banks. And if the Flash got in the way, I'd freeze him. We'd heat him up. We'd throw a top at his forehead and things like that. But we're trying to kill him. Yeah,
I love the top character. For me, I'm with you. The Captain Cold profile issue is my favorite. I must have reread that thing a dozen times. It was the first time I actually ever liked Captain Cold, really. I mean, I liked him in the earlier Bill Messner Rogue run. But he was a villain, a rogue turned good guy at that point. He was working with Wally.
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
And it was fine back then, but Geoff Johns made Captain Cold cool. I mean,
literally,
figuratively. Right? No pun. That wasn't even intended.
Yeah.
I believe that that the reason why Captain Cold was so cool on the Flash TV show, that it directly drew inspiration from Geoff Johns, 1,000%.
Yeah, that was in the early years, and the show was good. The first two.
It was good, right? Right, exactly. And it's it's out of the three great Flash writers, Waid, Bates, and Johns. If you notice, most of the stuff that's on that show that was good in the beginning is all from those three guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, was Johns a showrunner at the beginning?
He was definitely involved.
He was
I don't think
involved,
he
right?
was a
Yeah.
showrunner, but I think he was definitely a producer. I think,
Hmm.
but I don't think he was a showrunner. I'm
No,
not
I don't think
sure.
so either. I
But
think you're right. Yeah.
his fingerprint is there, even with stuff I didn't necessarily care for that much from his second Flash run. Um, but you can't deny his imprint on the character.
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
That run was amazing in his first run, and love the rogue profiles. Another little fun fact: when James Robinson and Geoff Johns launched Hawkman a few years into that run, they
Hmm.
did a similar thing with that was very similar to the rogue profiles and the Times Past issues of Starman. They did past lives
Past
issues.
lives, right? Yeah, those I remember. Right.
Those were fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, at one point in the past lives, Hawkman, and Hawkgirl were part of the Wild West, right? He was, I think, he was the Western character in the 50s and 60s, Nighthawk. Was he that
I'll tell
character?
you what Geoff Johns does, I think, better than anyone is he, like, even better than Waid in this aspect. He just really knows how to tie things into DC history
Oh yeah,
that would seem obscure and odd, but makes sense. He made one of the past lives of Hawkman and Hawkgirl, Nighthawk and Cinnamon from
Night,
the Western comics.
Nighthawk,
He
right?
made
Yes, Nighthawk and Cinnamon,
the
right?
he made them the Shining Knight too.
Oh,
Was
that's
also
right. I forgot
Hawkman.
that. Hmm.
Yep. And then who else? And then he made up his own. He made up
Yeah,
his own characters for it. And then even not I don't want to get too far off track. But Ed Brubaker did a fill-in issue after Johns left, and he made them really cool 1920s like gangster couple. It was
I
really
remember
fun.
that one. Yep. Yeah. So
But
no,
yeah, I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it's fantastic. Johns, he's when he's at his best, fantastic writer, and his first Flash run is him at his best.
Yeah, it really is. So he takes over the book with issue 164, and he launches into a story, Wonderland. Correct? Is that the first?
Wonderland, where Wally
Wonderland.
is actually stuck in a mirror dimension,
Uh-huh.
which this was a kind of a one-off originally. He wasn't set to be the ongoing Flash writer, but stuff from that Wonderland arc, which I really enjoyed, was sprinkled out and relevant to his entire remaining run. Other characters were like Plunder and Shire Murillo,
Hmm.
all became characters that were integral to the run throughout the remaining issues up to 225.
Yeah. So Chira and Murillo are introduced in that run.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, they're great characters. They're great supporting characters.
Murillo was, I'm sorry, Shire was like a big jerk in that run. Like
Yes.
he was like beating Wally up because Wally was powerless in the mirror world.
Yeah, he's kind of like Flash's version of Harvey Bullock to start out
Right,
with. Yeah,
right.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But then he
But
became like a great when he came back to the real world. He was a lovable, great cop.
yeah, and when his partner gets killed,
Oh,
he wants to take care of the child, right? Our baby. Yeah.
yeah, and that's
So
what I loved about the beginning. 'Cause I love the Wonderland arc, but my to me, Blood Will Run, the second arc, was really what got me super excited about the book. First, because Johns did something that you could tell he's like Mark Waid, a DC historian, and really knew the character of Wally West and all the Flashes. He made having Shire's partner Julie Jackman, who
mm,
was the one with the baby. There was a bit of a scare at first, thinking that her baby was Wally's, but they referenced
right.
the
Remember that.
beginning of Wally's run, where Wally was a womanizing jerk, and he
Hmm.
wasn't perfect, and how how maybe this might be consequences to his actions back in his heyday, and he acknowledges how he was before, how he milked the costume to get women, and whatnot, even get health insurance in the beginning of his run. So I love that he addressed that, and it was a great story, gritty, and like I said, John's nailed Wally and Linda and all that, and Captain Cold. But probably the best part, what really got me about that first arc, was Scott Collins' amazing
Ah,
art.
yes, we have to talk
That
about
guy,
Scott Collins.
oh, you opened up. If anyone hasn't read this run, even if you skip right to issue 170, the first part of Blood Will Run,
Hmm.
you open up that book, it's like the pages crackle and you can smell the Speed Force.
Yeah, no, you're right. The rubber hits the road, and it's amazing. Um, we've talked about this before, how kinetic it is, the after images and the lightning and the movement and the way he moves across the page, left to right, right to left. There's just so many
After
angles.
images,
Yeah, yeah, it's just incredible.
after I had one of my pride and joys is when I was going to when that came out. I was going to a comic book store in Huntington that actually terribly burned down years later. I was friends with the owner and one of the guys there, and I'm always a big sucker for those DC promo posters because first
Hmm.
of all, no one else can get them; they don't sell them, and I just get them whenever I would be able to get. I had a great collection of them, but I have a Scott Collins Flash promo poster from that run. It's from issue one. I think it was. I think it was 174, the issue with Tar Pit.
Hmm.
It's just Wally running through town after he has suited up, and it is the most beautiful image ever. Scott Collins to me is up there with Michael Ringo, Carmen Infantino, Greg LaRocque. I think he is, Francis Manipal. I think he is. He stands above even a lot of them. He's one of the best Flash artists of all time.
Oh, I would completely agree with that. Yeah, I would. I guess it's Carmen Infantino because he actually drew not only Barry, but he from the mid '40s on he drew Jay Garrick in the Flash comics. But Mr. Collins takes backseat to no one, and he had a great inker, Doug Hazelwood, who was just amazing, and he was perfect for his pencils. He didn't. It wasn't a heavy line, but it wasn't a light line. It was just perfect to bring out and highlight the artwork and just complete the artwork on the page. You mentioned Tar Pit, and that just gets me to think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first time Wally goes up against Tar Pit, it's in the hockey arena, right? Hockey.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a shout out to our buddy Chris, who's a big NHL fan. So Chris, put it in there for you. I wanted to mention that for you. So yeah, that's that was a hell of a fight.
Was the Keystone Combines was the team. The Keystone City Combines is the hockey team.
Yeah, I went to a superhero fight and a hockey game broke out.
Yeah.
A variation of the old joke.
Yep, yep. And it was just great. It was a great issue. Captain Cole's in that issue too.
Yep. Oh, he's sitting in the stands, right? He's got
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and he's there. He's there with a prostitute.
Yeah, he was there with the bimbo du jour. Yeah.
Yep, yep. He helps Wally. I think he helps. He freezes Tar Pit, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. What's the? Well, let's see. What's any more you want to say about the Blood Will Run? Because I think.
Oh, it's a fantastic run. It was dark. Basically, the whole premise was this cult leader kind of guy, Citica or Cicada, however they pronounce it.
Cicada, I believe that's how they pronounce it in the TV show. Cicada, yeah.
The show, right? He was going around. Basically, he was going around killing anyone that the Flash had saved before.
That's right.
Yep, he was going around taking. Because somehow he took this lightning bolt blade, and he would steal the Speed Force from these people. Had a little bit of Speed Force in them, I guess, for some reason. Because while he saved them, he was going around killing everyone the Flash ever saved. And one of those people he saved was Julie Jackman. Was the woman who thought she had Wally's child.
Mm-hmm.
Great arc. It really. At that point, Geoff knew he was on the book for a while, so he really was planting seeds there that would continue to go on. That's where you first see the Shire and Murillo in the real world. That's where you start planting the seeds for something going on with the Pied Piper. You didn't know what yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Looked like something was going on that he was.
With Hartley, right? Yeah.
Right. There was a scene of someone who looked like Hartley killing his family.
Right.
And that doesn't pay off for like almost a year in our time, at least publishing time. But he planted the seeds, and it's so well done. I love that art.
Well, that's the thing. You've mentioned this a couple of times how Johns planted seeds in this run, and that harkens back to I think the great the Marvel books of the especially the Silver Age and the early Bronze Age, where guys like Stan Lee and Roy Thomas, Archie Goodwin, Jerry Conway, of course, were planting seeds in books that would pay off 3 or 4 issues or even a year down the road, with the subplots. And as an avid reader, you love that because it's like, oh, geez, I remember that from like a few years ago or about a year ago. And you go out and you pull the copy out, reread that, and it's, oh, they're paying it off. This is so cool. So yeah, I mean, he just, no, I wouldn't say was, he is, put a was in front of Jeff's name, God forbid. He's a consummate professional, and he knows his craft so well.
And while at the same time doing that, but also telling self-contained either story arcs or even
Yeah.
sometimes one-off issues. I mean, Blood Will Run was 4 issues. Then there was the one issue, one shot with Tar Pit, and then there was a 2-issue Weather Wizard, 2-story two-parter, which I loved. Like the art in that was by Scott Collins was ridiculously good, and he made Mark Martin such a threat. I loved it. And the surprise spoiler in that is you find out that Mark is actually the father of Julie Jackman's baby.
Yes, a little late, folks, but yeah, spoiler alert.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. No, I do it all the time. Yeah. So at the conclusion of Blood Will Run, is that when the Iron Heights special hits? Around that time?
No.
Is that later on?
The Iron Heights comes out either, I think it was right after issue 178.
Okay.
Which is the issue where Chunk shows up.
Chunk. Mm.
But the Weather Wizard story happens first. And then, shortly after that, another, that's 2 issues. And then a couple issues after that is when they have the Chunk issue. And then there's DC put out that one-shot, that prestige format. Geoff Johns, Ethan Van Sciver, Iron Heights special, which was about the first appearance of the Iron Heights prison, and Warden Wolf, and what really happens to the rogues when they go to Iron Heights prison, and why they're. And I remember Geoff Johns' tagline when he was describing it in the Silius. It was, "You're going to learn why the rogues try so hard to avoid the Flash, so they don't go to Iron Heights." Yeah,
I mean, I'm looking at the cover right now. I have it in my hand. It's a beautiful cover. And was that the first time we see Warden Wolf?
Yep.
Okay. I know DC's got some plans for Wolf. I know Jeremy Adams got some plans for Wolf in the upcoming months. So it should be interesting to see what's going to happen with him. But I won't spoil that in case people don't know. But yes. So what's our next run after Blood Will Run?
After that, after Blood Will Run, you have the Weather was a 2-parter and a couple of one-shots, all great. But what happens is now we're leading up to after the Iron Heights one-shot introduces some characters, the quote-unquote new rogues, Blacksmith, Girder, Tar Pit jumps in there, even though he wasn't introduced there, and more importantly, Murmur.
Oh, that's a scary freaking character.
Crazy psycho who cut out his own tongue and sewn his mouth shut because he had a nervous tick that would make him automatically confess to crimes that he did it, and he was a brutal murderer. And in that Iron Heights issue, we also see a flashback to Barry Allen, who had worked the Murmur case when it first happened back.
That's right. Forgot that. Yeah.
And then that ultimately leads, along with that leads into the prelude to Crossfire, which is a fantastic arc.
Crossfire, yes. Now Crossfire is this is where they bring back Goldface, right?
Yes.
Yeah. When I was rereading it again, I was saying, what is his motive? What is his end game here? But it surprised me, and I know that's the run that ends with Wally rebuilding the bridge, correct? The Van Buren Bridge.
Yep.
And that is, again, I want to go back again. Because as you know, I'm a big fan of Silver Age. That is such a Silver Age moment. Because that's the type of stuff Barry would do. And in a couple of pages, he'd rebuild a building, or Superman. I mean, Superman back in the Silver Age would, rebuild a dam or an entire, town or something like that. And, Wally rebuilds that bridge in like a matter of seconds. It's just amazing. That was, it's just an incredible piece of writing and artwork. Yeah.
And when you see it, you talking about it reminds me of something I've read in interviews at the time. Is when you see it, you see the bridge, and then they show the Twin Cities. The first time in the run, they show the Twin Cities of Central and Keystone, because Barry City was Central, and later on, Wally ended up adopting the city of Keystone City. Not where he grew up. He grew up in Blue Valley, Nebraska, but he ended up that's where he became, as Wally says in the first few pages of the Blood Will Run arc. He says, "I grew up in Nebraska, but this is Keystone where I became a hero."
Yeah.
and you see that wonderful, double page spread of the bridge in the Twin Cities, and it
Hmm.
reminds me of when Geoff talks about when he first got the book, and he was working with Scott, not in the first arc, when he was working with Scott Collins. They literally sat down and mapped out both cities, where
Wow.
everything basically was, where what was pertinent to what, and Scott and Jeff both used that as like a template when they were telling their stories throughout the run.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember our fans, hopefully they've listened to it, our Western episode, we talked about how setting was a character. And it's very much so. Keystone and Central City become a character in this run. It's you recognize the streets, the street names, the corners, the buildings. It's like I said, it's all laid out, so they know where everything is. And we have Gotham City, we have Opal City, we have Metropolis, the city of tomorrow, and now we've got the Twin Cities, and it's really cool. It just draws the reader in more. It makes you part of the story more when the setting becomes a character, and you know exactly what streets and bridges Wally's whizzing through and wishing through to rescue someone or put somebody behind bars. It's just a
Yeah,
great image.
the devil's in the details. When
Yeah.
when little things like that seem real, it just pulls you in more. It's almost I think we even said it. I won't go too much on a tangent, but when we were talking about in the Breaking Bad episode, how little things like how Marie having purple all over her house, just it makes you. Everything seems more real because that's something someone would do in real life. And it's the same
Mhm.
thing with the city, especially when Scott Collins drew it.
Yeah.
You felt like this was a real place. It's like you felt like Opal City is a real place, while a very much more unusual place, but it
Mhm.
felt like a real place. Um, so much character of its own. But yeah, so yeah, the Crossfire arc was fantastic. You had rogues against rogues in there because there was
Mhm.
two factions of rogues, and then out of nowhere they thought that Geoff Johns throws the Thinker in there, and then blows up the whole friggin' thing for poor Wally.
Yeah, he does. No, it's just great. It's a book about the fastest man alive, and the comic just keeps coming at you. It's uh, wasn't there a Mark Waid story that had the word velocity in it? A run was that
Oh
terminal
God,
velocity?
terminal velocity.
I
That
was
was.
like, yeah, John's, yeah. There's a
I'll
lot
tell
of
you,
velocity here. Yes, that too.
one day we have to do a Mark Waid,
Oh, definitely.
but that's a lot longer of a run, more issues,
Yeah.
and I can go. I can go on a tear about. I can talk about Mark Waid's run forever.
Well, here's a question now I'd like to ask, as long as we mentioned Wade. Would you say that Jones's run, because of the introduction of the rogues and the special attention he gave them, vis-a-vis their backgrounds, would you say it's probably a little more adult this run than the Mark Wade run as a comic
Absolutely,
book per se?
this is definitely a darker run, but still with the optimism that
Yes.
Wally West has.
Yeah.
That's definitely still there. It's almost like the world around him is darker, but it's still very much Wally.
Yeah, and if the world around is darker and Wally can still maintain his hopeful attitude, that makes him even more of a hero. And
Honestly,
yeah.
it does because Johns puts Wally more through the ringer than Wade
Oh yeah. Oh,
did, and
definitely. Yeah.
he's always smiling, even before things really turn around for him. He chooses to always be smiling. That's what I love. One of the things I love about that, and also he shows his just devotion and love for his wife.
Yeah. We've talked about that so many times. That Wally didn't become a man until he met Linda. She made a man out of him,
Yep,
and she's one of my favorite supporting characters in all of comics. She's right up there with Lois Lane and Jim Gordon, and yeah, she's a great supporting character.
I
Mary Jane
I,
Watson. She's right up there with all those. Yeah.
I agree. I don't, I would never throw shade at Barry and Iris because I love those characters, but they've they've never. I don't really find them that interesting together or believable together. I love them both separately more.
Mm.
Um, there's never them together, especially back in the Silver and Bronze Age. Iris was kind of there was nothing likable about her then. She was always a jerk to Barry. I liked her more as Wally's aunt
Yeah.
when she was a little bit older. Um, and here and there, I've had moments with them together, but I don't feel like Wally and Linda have the best relationship in the Flash history.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, obviously, as this run is progressing, there's the Flash family is still around. Bart, right?
Yeah, not
Um,
as prominent
not as
as
prominent.
during Wade's run, but yes.
And Wally was still having some problems keeping the reins, on Bart, but and he had to learn along. I think it was a learning experience for both of them, these stories progress. And of course, there was Jessie Quick, right? She had
Well,
an
yeah.
interesting arc in these stories.
Also, don't forget, for a bit, characters were taken off the table because a part of the little fun fact, a part of the Crossfire buildup, because there was a few issues of buildup. A part of that was the blacksmith's rogues, not Captain Cole's rogues.
Right.
Blacksmith's rogues were, they had their agenda for Keystone City, which I won't spoil for anyone who wants to read
Yeah.
it. But what she was doing, she was taking Wally's, taking players off the field. So Wally was alone when this would happen.
Hmm.
So in the Impulse book, you saw that Max Mercury was taken off the table, and that directly tied into Blacksmith because she had gotten in touch. I think it was with Rival, not right. I think it was Rival who brought who locked Max in the Speed Force for way too long, and then Jay got taken off the table because they gave the doctor gave Joan a fake cancer
Oh
diagnosis.
yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah.
So things like that happen, and then they did something to Jesse Quick's Quick Start company where they
Right.
made
Hmm.
there was like went bankrupt. Or they some kind of some insider trading issues or something like that to get her off the table. And
Yeah.
Bart was the only Bart was the only one really around, and he didn't really pop up in Crossfire at the time. But so the Flash family wasn't as prominent for a bit there. They come back later on post Ignition.
Yes, Ignition. We got to get to that soon. Yeah. No, they. It's like you said. It's Wally and Linda, Wally and the Rogues. It's just there's so much depth there. There's so much character. There's character-driven stories. There's a lot of action. It just keeps moving forward and it just keeps going. So after Crossfire, is it what happens next? Is it
Well,
what's the
after
next story?
Crossfire, there's of course, after a story like that, there's a bit of a calm.
Yeah, it has to be.
It has to be. That was a lot. So what they do is a couple basically one-offs. The first one's kind of like a recap to see where everyone is, how everyone's
Mhm.
doing after the events of Crossfire. Um, and in that story, is when you actually, I believe, is when you find out. Yeah, it is. It's when you find out that Linda's pregnant.
Right.
Because it's something that went on when during Crossfire they had to take her to the hospital, and you find that out. So that was a wonderful issue. That's also where you see more of Iris Allen, because Iris comes back during the Johns run. She was away for a while since the Waid run. She put herself into like self-imposed exile because she knew too much about Wally's future.
Oh, is future correct? Yeah.
Um, and then because of some time travel shenanigans, she said she no longer knew his fate, so she was able to come back. So that happens, and then you get there's a few things that happen. You get the wonderful Hawkman guest appearance.
Oh, I love that, especially the artwork there. Oh man, it is so incredible.
So
Collins
good,
Rosen, an amazing Hawkman. Yeah. Yeah,
so good.
and that talk back and forth, the conversation between Wally and Hawkman is just and then Hawkman kind of like reaffirms how much Wally's heroes, his friends in the Justice League, how much they think of him because he's worried that he's like he's not worthy of any of them, and Hawkman who's a very man of few words,
Right.
but says, well, no, they think highly of you, and they think you're a very you're the right successor to Barry. You're doing Barry's name. You're doing it very well, keeping his name going. So yeah, it was a very life affirming issue for Wally. That issue, I remember. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and sprinkled out there, like we said before, there's well, we actually, other than the Captain Cold and the Heat Wave and the Mirror Master rogue profile, they did a Pied Piper rogue profile,
Yes, that's right. Hmm.
which is right before the Hawkman issue, actually, and that was great because Pied Piper wasn't only a rogue; he was actually one of Wally's best friends now.
Yeah, he
He had
became a
become that.
friend during the Messer Lobes run, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
he became a friend with him there, and then became good friends during the Waid run. So they're gonna give you some, like, a little his origin as well as an update on where he is now and what's going on.
Mhm.
So that was great. And then what we get to next is basically the lead up to the Blitz arc, which is called Run Riot, which is the Gorilla Grodd run.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens is there's a character in the Secret Files introduced called Hunter Zolomon, who's a former FBI profiler who comes to Keystone City because he had an accident on the job. He was shot and he has a bum leg now. Got to walk with a cane, and it ruined his marriage. You find out later what his origin story is. Ruined his marriage and partially his career. So he comes to Keystone to start over, start fresh, and he becomes friends with Wally West. Because don't forget, at this time, for the whole run of Wally's run up to very recent, until up to a certain point, Wally doesn't have a secret identity.
Exactly
So
right.
they become good friends, and they work together on capturing some of the rogues. So Run Riot is this a 3-issue run, which amazing Scott Collins art, where basically Gorilla Grodd and his army take over Iron Heights prison with an agenda, and our friend Hunter Zolomon gets in the way and gets his back broken.
Exactly. There was some really visceral fight scenes in that 3-issue run. Yeah.
Yeah, Scott Collins was 1,000% on the top of his game. I think you said before, because we've seen his artwork elsewhere. When he's inked by Hazelwood, it's amazing.
Perfect match. We haven't mentioned, and I guess we should go back just during this time, the covers, right? The Brian Boland covers.
Oh my God!
Oh, it was gorgeous. Every cover looked like a painting, right? Just amazing.
Yeah, Brian Boland did every cover from 164 to 187.
Wow!
He almost finished the Crossfire arc, but that actual the last issue of Crossfire was the cover was done by Scott Collins, which was beautiful. But those Brian Boland covers they're in a league all their own. They're very, first of all, the content of the covers are, in my mind, very Silver Agey. They remind me of the Infantino covers to a very large degree, especially. What's that Infantino cover he did in Barry's run with the weather wizard cover when Barry, there's like a storm on Barry when he's trying to run. This very much reminds me of Brian Boland. His artwork, those covers, I would buy a book of just all of his covers. He's amazing, and his flash covers were fantastic.
Yeah, I'm looking at 164 right now, and Wally's being dragged off to jail. Fastest man alive, never heard of him. And it's like that's a Silver Age cover. It certainly is. It's just so it harkens back to the Silver Age. Like, oh my God, the hero's being dragged off to jail. Why, he's a hero? Why is he being dragged off to jail? And they never heard of him. It reminds me of my first Flash comic, 163. Stop! Don't pass this issue up, or I'll die. And I said before, 10-year-old Joe didn't want to be responsible for this guy dying, so he picked up the comic book and he ran home and read it. And I was a Flash fan.
It's funny you bring that up because I am a crazy person and read so many interviews, especially back then. Keep in mind, like when John's run came out, the internet was a thing, message boards were a thing. I was very friendly with Geoff Johns on his message board. I would read interviews. I would talk to him. He would answer my questions. It would,
cool.
So a lot of cool stuff happened because of that. But one of the things is pertinent to what you just said. That was Geoff Johns' first issue of reading the Flash. No, I'm sorry. That wasn't the one. I apologize. Geoff Johns' first issue of reading the Flash. What he got, his uncle gave him a box of comics, and the first one was I mixed them up because it's very similar. The one where Captain Cold is holding up the picture, a censored picture, and says,
"Yes,
they won't let you see what I've done to the Flash, but buy this issue to look inside." That was Geoff Johns' first comic book of the Flash that he bought and read. That he read, not bought.
I think that's the run that comes after the Carmine Infantino run, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you open that up, I'm pretty sure that's a Murphy Anderson cover, or possibly Infantino ink by Murphy Anderson. But I think at that point, Infantino was bumped upstairs to art director, and then he becomes publisher. And I believe the inside of that book is Ross Andrew. We won't get into that now because even though he's one of my favorite artists of all time, he's
Gosh,
never
and
been
he
put on
was.
the flash. Yeah, but yeah,
But
so
yeah,
that was the
that's
first issue. Wow.
yeah. He again. I was so involved in this run. That's why it's one of my favorites too. I read it as it came out. I was on the message board. I was rereading it. I was speculating, talking to him on a website, going to comic book conventions and talking to him. Yes, he came to what's it Collector's Kingdom in Huntington, the store I mentioned
Oh,
before. He did a signing there, and this wasn't the Geoff Johns he is now at all. He was just getting on Infinite Crisis, which was big. He wasn't the superstar he is yet,
mm,
and there wasn't that many people there, Joe. So I hung out there
wow.
with him all day, all day.
Oh, cool. You
Him
get to pick his brain.
him and Phil Jimenez were there, and
Oh, another
I
great
just
artist.
sat
Yeah.
there. Some people would come in and get things signed. I sat there, talked to him all day, picked his brain, um, watched him eat combos and whoever was drinking eat combos was like a snack. Um, normally I wouldn't bother someone like him with so many things. There wasn't a lot of people there, and he wasn't the superstar yet. I literally had him sign every issue of the Flash that he did.
Wow.
I'm a psycho. I had doubles of everything. Of his Flash, I had ones that were signed and ones that weren't. But it was a great time to be a Flash fan. It was so exciting going every Wednesday. When that issue came out to read that book. It was one of the best times for me reading comics. And and then that arc, there was a couple single issues in between there that dealt with like the top or this and that. And then there was one where and then basically Blitz starts.
Mm,
There's a prelude to it, and then of one issue where you see what kind of causes this new Blitz. Basically, is the story of Zoom,
mhm.
the new Reverse Flash, not Thawne from Barry's early years
Right.
or from Wally's early years as
Not
well.
Eobard. No.
Yep, not Ebard, and so it was basically you didn't know who it was going to be. We all had ideas,
Yeah.
but because it was it was plainly there for most people, but you didn't know for sure. And the Blitz story is about the new Zoom, who has a very different agenda than Thawne. His thought process is that he respects Wally and he wants to make him a better hero.
Better hero. Yeah, exactly.
That's his whole spiel, and he feels that Wally's never, at that point at least, suffered great tragedy, and that was what he had to give him in order to make him do what it took to be a great hero. And that would Blitz, Joe. I mean, what are your opinions?
I loved it, and you explained this to me off air recently because I was always a little confused about his power set, but apparently he's not connected to the Speed Force, right? And
Nope.
he has the ability to move through time. Correct? Is that the best assessment of his powers?
Yeah, he can basically move back and forth
Through
through
time.
time. He doesn't tap into the Speed Force at all. He can move. He almost has like his own timeline he's going through. He
Mm,
can go slow, fast, and reverse and forward, which is what throws off in the Blitz story when Wally gets assistance from Jay Garrick and Bart.
mhm.
Throws him off because Wally has the ability to both steal and lend speed from moving objects,
Right.
including speedsters, and he couldn't do it because the Zoom doesn't tap into the Speed Force like other speedsters, and he finds that out the hard way.
Yeah, he certainly does. Yeah, no, it's a great story, and I love the story that comes next. I think, I think we said when we were texting off air, I think the next story is Ignition. Correct? Is that the next?
Yes.
Now we without giving anything away, I guess we shouldn't mention that there's a tragedy at the end
Well,
of
it's
Blitz, right?
definitely it's a huge event
Yes.
in Wally's life at the end of Blitz. It's a great story, tons of action, tons of heart, and tragedy. And
Which leads to the changes in the Ignition story.
yes, there's basically a big change in status quo for the Flash after in the final pages of Blitz, and that lead into Ignition. There's also also this is the last arc of Scott Collins drawing the
Yeah.
book.
I remember when I picked up the first issue, which I guess was 201, the first issue of
Yep.
the. I was a little disappointed. How do you pronounce the artist's name? Is Dos
Alberto Dos.
Alberto Dos? Um, yeah, I was like, this doesn't look like. Look,
Yeah, no, at first I was like, I remember seeing the previews on like I think it was Newsarama, and I was like, ugh.
it's kind of reminiscent of Eduardo Risso's artwork.
Oh, 100%, which I
Right?
love,
Yeah,
but it's jarring after someone like Scott Collins. It's jarring for the Flash, period.
it is. But as the story progresses, I believe it's 6 parts.
Yep.
And I just read that. I read that about a week and a half ago. I just fell in love with that story, I'm going to read it again because it is just it's an amazing story about finding yourself again. Now we know, I guess we can tell our audience that Wally has amnesia, so to speak, and
Yeah, there's a reason for it, but
there's a reason for it, right?
he doesn't remember being the Flash ever.
But it's
And
more than Wally just remembering that he's the Flash. It's Wally remembering that he's a hero,
yep.
and that's what this story shows us in great detail. And it's I use this term a lot, life affirming, but it fits this story so well. It really does.
And one thing that what I love about it reaffirms something that I feel like John's kind of lost a little bit over the way years later. That it reaffirms that while he doesn't remember ever being the Flash, while he has an incident where his powers kick in though, and he's like, "What the hell's going on?"
Mm-hmm.
And what does Wally do immediately? He saves people. He does the right thing. He becomes a hero just because it's in him. It's the right thing to do, not because
Right.
his parents were killed in an alley, not because his mother was murdered and he has to, do this. It's because it's the right thing, and that's who he is. He's not perfect. He's far from perfect, Wally, but he's a hero at heart, and that's what that arc really, overall, was really I felt about.
Wally cares. Wally does. I think we've spoken about this once before. The episode of Justice League, was it United?
Justice League Unlimited.
Unlimited.
Yeah.
Thank you. When Wally, now who's the villain that Orion and somebody else want to beat the crap out of in the bar?
Trickster. Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
Voiced by Mark Hamill.
And Wally sits down. He's whoa, let me take care of this. And he asks him, James, are you taking your medication? And it's like this is quintessential Wally. He's not going to go in there guns blazing. He's going to try to talk them down first, and because he treats people, even the villains, as humans. Yeah, as people.
Yeah, that's who Wally is. I mean, listen, he's not perfect. There have been times where if he has went through a rough time, he can be a jerk to anyone. Really, that's what makes him human. Really, but ultimately, he always listen. Even now in the great Jeremy Adams run, what happens when he goes up against Heatwave and he finds out Heatwave has like a brain tumor or something like that? He's like, I'm gonna help you. We're gonna fix this. He doesn't just beat him into submission and throw him in Iron Heights. He that's Wally. He cares.
Yeah, Wally's a blue collar hero, and that's Johns builds that up throughout all these different storylines as he's literally taking us around the Twin Cities. Mentions many times that if you drive it, meaning a car, it was probably made here in Keystone, and Wally's very much of a blue collar superhero, and in Ignition he winds up doing a blue collar job. He becomes an auto mechanic, and it's like it's so perfect. It just fits the character so well.
How many times, especially when Scott Collins was drawing it, because he put so much detail in the Keystone. There was I used to want to buy one. I wish they made it. There was Wally and other Pete characters, but especially Wally when he wasn't in his Flash suit. Would wear like these T-shirts saying I was built in Keystone because it was a car and industry.
Yeah.
I love that. There's little details like that were so well done. And you're right. When Wally doesn't have his memory, doesn't know who he is, he has to get a job because before that his job was being the Flash. Linda worked. Plus, I'm sure the Justice League at this point paid you a certain amount of money.
Yeah, they probably got a stipend. Yeah.
Right. That was his. He would always say is like, I want to be that's what I always wanted to be when I grew up was the Flash. Mm-hmm. So, but now that he had a memory, and now because of that he has a secret identity. So even after he gets his memory back, he has to keep up the job because you have to sell that whole thing. yeah, he picks a blue collar job, which was pretty cool. I'm glad they're going in a different direction with it now, but I definitely like that. I think that Alberto Dos art was perfect for that type of arc,
It definitely was.
especially because Wally was working nights. That was like a
Yeah.
part of the story. So during the day, after the arc ends and he knows who he is, the Flash is out during the day in the sunshine, which is even great. That last issue, after things get resolved, and Wally is leaving the house to go out now and patrol town as the Flash. The art changes from Alberto Dos to the next artist, Howard Porter, for the last page, and it's Wally during the day in the sunshine, smiling and running to save the day, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, it really was. So what follows Ignition, Keith? What's the next? There's one more storyline, right?
After Ignition there's a bunch of there's two major storylines, but there's a bunch of like fill-in stuff where Wally's reintroducing himself to the public now.
Oh yes, yeah. Unmask himself, and boom, their memory comes back.
Right, and the JLA's, and especially Batman, very suspicious and wants to know why did the whole world forget who the Flash was. So they delve into that, which is very good. They're also more concerned about that because this is happening right before Identity Crisis, and for anyone who doesn't know, Identity Crisis had a lot of mind-wiping shenanigans.
Yep.
So they, basically, there's a little fill-in issues here and there, not fill-in issues, but one-shot issues here and there, and then some rogue profiles. But there's two remaining story arcs to Geoff Johns' first run. One is an Identity Crisis tie-in, which gives you both Wally and Barry's perspective of the whole mind-wiping thing, which was very good. It brought up the stuff with the top, and it was very, very good.
Yeah, we learned the top has kind of mental powers, right? Yeah.
Yes.
He's more than just a guy that can spin around, yeah.
Yeah, he's scary. He's not
he really is. Yeah, they really upped his game.
Absolutely. And he has, going back, Top's got a history with Barry, because Barry, it wasn't his fault, but Top died fighting Barry. Barry didn't kill him. But Top's girlfriend at the time, Captain Cold's sister, Lisa Snart, blamed Barry for that, and that was a bit of a nightmare for Barry's run for a bit that Carrie Bates wrote, because Lisa Snart, the Golden Glider, was coming after Barry hard bad, and she knew who Barry was, so she knew his secret identity, I should say. She was going after his marriage. So they have a bit of a history there, the Top and the Flash, more, and Barry in particular. So that was told in the called The Secret of Barry Allen arc, which was the Identity Crisis crossover. And then they lead into the final arc, which is called Rogue War, which was basically a lot of elements from the entire Flash run coming together, elements from Identity Crisis, because you were introduced to the new Captain Boomerang in that book. It all comes together to tell you basically the last Geoff Johns Flash story, and that's where you have the prelude in that Wizard half issue, and it all kind of comes in there. And basically, what the premises there are the Captain Cold rogues versus the rogues that were reformed, the ones that are ran by the original Trickster. You have Magenta in there with Wally's ex-girlfriend. You have
Piper.
Piper. Heatwave at the time, because he was
reformed
at the time, and they're fighting Captain Cold and his rogues over the dead body of the original Captain Boomerang.
That's right. Yeah.
Not a Flash spoiler. That's an Identity Crisis spoiler.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, we get away with that.
So yeah, that was and the Flash. At that point, Howard Porter was penning penciling the book for a while, and as you and I have discussed before, it's probably some of his best work.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah, gorgeous stuff. I mean, I'm not crazy about what he's doing now. I don't think he's got a proper inker, but
me neither,
his stuff looked great then. It really did. Yeah, it's
such a great arc. It was his art was on par. Geoff brought in a lot of, like I said, a lot of stuff that was sprinkled up throughout his run, stuff from Blitz in particular. Don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but a lot of stuff gets tied up in a neat bow in a great place, and a lot of guest stars from the past that you wouldn't have expected, maybe. Okay. A lot of speedster fun, and revelation stuff that was planted in even Identity Crisis, which was in even John's book, gets answered there, because one of the mysteries of Identity Crisis is who's the new Captain Boomerang's mom, because the new Captain Boomerang has
That's
speed.
right.
And they reveal that. Unfortunately, no one really picks up on that too much after the fact, and they kind of rush and kill off that character years later. But yeah, it was a great run. What did you think of that last arc?
No, as you said, it's a great finale to a 5-year run. He's just pulling everything together and bringing it all together, and it's very satisfying. And to see the rogues, go to war with each other, but then all that mind wiping and all that stuff that Top did kind of gets reversed, and they all become rogues again. Correct? They all become
Well, yeah.
Because
Well,
be careful what you wish for, you might get it, so to speak.
Right. I mean, you find out who turned them good to begin
Yeah,
with.
we won't get that away, right?
Top basically reverses it.
He reverses it, yeah. So that's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I completely forgot that when I read these stories the first time. I was like, whoa, this is a great twist, and it's just
interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting what happens to some of them, though. Like Piper in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very, very good stuff. I love that arc. What would you say is your favorite arc if you had to pick one out of all the Geoff Johns run?
Even though I love Scott Collins, even though I think he's the greatest Flash artist since Carmen Infantino, I'm picking Ignition. It's a very character-driven story. It's got so much heart, it's some of the best writing he did for Linda in that story, even though she's away for a while. But the way they reconcile at the end, it's just a beautiful story. I would highly recommend that. I hope that's in a separate trade, and I'm sure it is. But we'll do our recommendations at the end. But that's my favorite of his run. Yeah, that's my favorite. Ignition.
Yeah. It's so tough to pick one, but I'm very close to you on that. Like, for me, it's tough. While it was coming out, I don't think I had any more excitement than I had for Blitz.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Yeah.
But I will say, looking back, I've reread the run so many times. For me, it's very close between Ignition and Blood Will Run. I'd probably go with Blood Will Run. A lot of it is because of this new feel it brought to the Flash and this excitement for me. And the Scott Collins art, I think, was never more perfect than in those issues. And I feel like he has captured Wally's voice really well, and the world, and him being heroic but also not perfect by throwing in the stuff with the Julie Jackman stuff. I love that. But it's very close to Ignition for me, though, too. I've reread them both probably the most out of that whole run.
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, there isn't a stinker in the whole run. I mean, every story is good. The standalones, the profiles, it's just an incredible tour de force by a writer who was, obviously at that point was, at the peak of his powers.
Oh, I mean, I can't even tell you, Joe. Like, those years, God, those were some of the best years in comics. Because first of all, Geoff was writing Flash, Hawkman, and JSA.
Yeah.
Two of my favorite DC characters and my favorite DC team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which was amazing to me. And then you had Mark Waid at Marvel doing Fantastic Four. I'm like, it was just like incredible time. There was so many good books out there.
There really was.
Baker on the and Rucka on the Gotham Central. It was just an incredible time. But yeah, that this run, I think I can't recommend it enough to people, especially people now who are like, Geoff Johns fans that maybe didn't read his earlier work. I feel like you'll have a real appreciation for it, and you'll see stuff, Joe. You'll remember this stuff that even pertinent to other books. There's seeds planted for Green Lantern Rebirth in this series. So if you're a Hal Jordan fan and you love Green Lantern Rebirth and Geoff Johns' entire Green Lantern run, if you want to see where a lot of that started, I would read this run of Flash, particularly Blitz.
Right. I forgot that. Yes, you're right.
Mm-hmm. And right around the Secret of Barry Allen story too, there's a lot of stuff that leads directly into in the Green Lantern Rebirth.
Mm-hmm. It's at that point he's, as you said, he's writing 3 books. He's obviously very involved in the office, what's going on, and it shows in his work. And he's just laying down so many foundations that paid off in the next few years.
Yeah,
With Infinite Crisis, right? Yeah, I mean that's
my only thing that kind of bugged me, not bugged me, I just disappointed that I kind of wish he didn't get as popular so quick, only because I feel like he had a long-term plan for Hawkman, and I think he left it early because of Teen Titans and Infinite Crisis.
Yeah, I forgot he wrote Teen Titans. You're right. I forgot that. Yeah, yeah.
I just feel like that Hawkman run had a lot more to come, you know?
He wrote about 25 issues, the first 25 issues of Hawkman.
25.
Yeah.
And a Secret Files,
Hmm.
and I think that, no annual. But didn't you get that feeling reading it? Like there was just more to come, you know?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I just read 13 and 14 today, where Kendra is they're trying to pin the murder of the police officer back in
Oh,
Texas
yeah.
on her, and we find out who killed her parents. I won't give that away, but
That's Ethan Van Sciver on it, right?
yeah, yeah. Ethan Scribe did that issue 12 or 13, or yeah, it's beautiful. This is the first time I saw his artwork. I said, "Whoa, this guy's really good." Uh,
Yeah, it's incredible.
but
Incredible.
there was no, it's just amazing stuff. And you're right, he did leave that too early. But I guess he wanted to move on, or maybe he was told to move on. You got to do Titans now, okay? Teen Titans, and that was very good. So yeah, so we're not ready to wrap up yet, just yet. So because I got but that wraps up Geoff Johns' run on the Flash. Is that correct, Keith? After
Yeah,
225.
that was the end. I mean, we all know that Geoff Johns came back. I mean, he did write Wally a couple scenes in Infinite Crisis with Wally, which
Mm-hmm.
were great, where Wally gets taken off the board. And those are great little scenes because Wally does what he always does. He runs runs right into the fire, into the big disaster, and does what's right to try to save the day.
Right.
And he wrote them. He wrote him there, and he also at that same point wrote him a little bit in that final JLA arc.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it for Geoff Johns writing Wally. Years later, you'll see Geoff Johns comes back to the Flash to bring back Barry Allen.
Right.
And Wally's in there a little bit, but I didn't love that run as much. I have some problems with that.
Yeah, we've
But
talked about that many times, right? Yes.
yeah, there are some high points in that, but overall, not really. But again, he also didn't have the chance to complete his vision because of the New 52. So
Yeah,
who knows how that would have played out?
exactly. So before we wrap this up, I've got some, if you don't mind. I guess it's only fair to call it a lightning round because we're talking
Oh,
about
nice.
the Flash. I got some questions for you.
Okay.
So Barry Allen. Let's talk about his arch enemy. Is it Cold? Is it Grodd? Is it Eobard Thawne? Who would you say? Who would you say
I
that?
think I think for Barry Allen, I think even prior to all the stuff that happened, with Geoff Johns doing the Dawn going back in time and killing the mom,
Mm.
and the TV show redoing that, Flashpoint, and all that. I think even way before that, in my opinion, I would think that Dawn was definitely the ultimate Barry Allen villain. I mean, he killed Iris.
Mm.
Not only did he kill Iris Allen, which was, man, I remember reading that as a kid in back issues. It broke my heart. But he did that and dragged it out for him. Tortured him along the way, before finding out that it was him, setting up someone else first, and then later coming back and trying to kill Barry's fiance on the day of his wedding,
Fiona Webb, right? Yeah,
Fiona Webb.
yeah.
And then ultimately Barry Allen kills him, which I think in a way he kills him in order to protect Fiona, but in a way it's almost like something else bad that Thawne did to him. He made Barry kind of compromise who he was,
Yeah.
and I think it's kind of, in my opinion, yeah, I feel like there's no other option. It's Thawne all the way, even before 2009.
And for Wally, would it be Zoom? Would it be Hunter Zolomon Zoom? Or
Well,
is it
I mean,
Captain Cold?
well, this is the thing for me. Personally, when it comes on a real a hate for each other, or the hate that the villain has for Wally and the recurring trouble that he's given him, despite everything that happens in Blitz, I will say I believe it's Abracadabra.
Ah, yes. You talked about this offline yesterday. Yeah, I think
You know, because Zoom did some terrible stuff to Wally, but there's like a friendship there and a mental uh, illness with in a way, in my opinion, with Zoom. Kadabra is just this showman, ego, guy who
Super
Wally
egomaniac, yes.
super and Wally bested him one too many times, and Kadabra would wait years and this put some scheme together, and throughout Waid's run, like 4 or 5 times, it's coming at Wally, and each time, getting worse and worse at what he does to Wally, and Wally always bested him in this great way. Oh my God, that's something we definitely should discuss if we do the Waid
Yeah.
run. But I would say Abracadabra for me would be Wally West's main Flash villain.
Okay. All right. Let's see what else do I have for you. Okay. I mean, I know I had to ask you this because we've spoken about this so many times, and I want you to let our listeners in on your thoughts about this. If you were given the chance to write a Jay Garrick Flash centric book, how would you approach it, Keith?
Oh, I think I might have told you this before.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up.
my idea. I wish some writer would do this. I would love it. Now I'm stealing something from Marvel, but everyone steals from each other writers. Yeah. I would love to basically do a version of all new X-Men that Bendis did at Marvel, where he brought the 5 original X-Men to the current time, and the premise was more to talk sense into the current Cyclops because they thought he was off the rails. But it doesn't really matter to me how Jay gets here. But I would love to see a Jay Garrick in his prime in the current day, not being the Flash everyone just looks up to, or just that he's older and he has to kind of get kicked out of the fight sooner. I want to see Jay in his prime, kicking ass, but also being that 1940s Captain America kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Kind of guy, I want that so bad, and I really want what's his name? The guy who he did Ultimate Spider-Man with Bendis with Miles on like his second run. He also did. I bring it up because he did Jay Garrick in that Flash 700 book. He did the few pages of it. I forget his name.
Oh,
I think he even did JLA with Bendis, like one arc. He's actually, which poor. This was a waste there. But
I can't. I can't think of. I know who you mean. I just can't think of.
I can't remember his name, but it doesn't matter. I would love to see Jay Garrick in his prime, 25-year-old Jay Garrick, gets shot into our current timeline, and I'm not saying you have to even take Barry or Wally off the board, to have him here. You can have him interact with him, but I want Jay to be the man. I want to see him interact with everyone. I want to see, the emotional beats there that would be if a young Jay had to team up with a young Barry and Wally, or to see what happened to the world now, and to see that he wouldn't have his Joan Garrick, around at that time, or who knows, maybe he's not even married to her in the past yet, so who knows.
That's right, yeah, depending on
ultimately I want
you're plucking him from,
and maybe he would even see himself, the Jay Garrick of now, who knows. They can play with that, and ultimately you put him back in his box and put him back into the past where he needs to be, but I would love to see that. I think there's so much potential there, and it bugs me that all these times they would do these little Flash, I feel like they should have done that in 2006 when they made Bart the Flash, because that was never going to be permanent anyway.
Right.
So they should have done something like that fun for a year or two until they brought back whoever they were bringing back and give us a really good story. So, a long answer to your short question.
No. I'm glad you did, because I'm glad you outlined that, because I wanted our listeners to hear that, because you've outlined this to me before, and I think it's a great concept. I really do.
Oh, it'd be so much fun. I love Jay so much. He's my second favorite Flash, and I love him.
Here's one. Have you ever read the very first Flash versus Superman race from Superman Volume 1, 199 from 1967?
Yeah, I didn't own a copy of it, but I had a trade where it was collected, yes.
Okay. Do you know what's odd about the cover of that book? Now, that's by Carmen Infantino, inked by Murphy Anderson, the cover. The inside, of course, is Kurt Swan, inked by his then inker at the time, George Klein. But if you look at that cover, the Justice League is on both sides, and they're rooting on their favorite. The word balloon that's supposed to be pointing at someone else, where the character saying, "Go get him, Flash," is pointing to Batman. And as a 11-year-old, I didn't get that back. I didn't get that then. But as the years went on, I said, "Wait a minute, they're supposed to be friends, especially in the Silver Age. Why would Batman be rooting on Barry and not Superman?" So there was an error on that cover. Whoever placed the word balloons placed it in the wrong spot. But it's a great comic book, and of course it ends in a tie.
Right.
And then they run, I think next the following year they run in Barry's book, and it also ends in a tie. Although they give you the different perspective of them crossing the finishing line, and you reader can make up your own mind.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And that issue was penciled by Ross Andrew and Mike Esposito. Great comic book team, Wonder Woman, Metal Men, tons of war and Western comics, but they should have never drawn the Flash. No.
Yeah.
And the last question, I guess this is a layup. And maybe I'm just trying to be mean to this person, but why do you think Dan Didio hated Wally West so much?
Okay, honestly, I have very much opinions on Dan Didio. I don't, Dan says stuff in interviews, and I don't necessarily believe him. I don't think he has this vision that he pretended to have a lot. I was there when before Hal Jordan came. So anyway, when Barry Allen was coming back in the Flash, Dan posted an article or whatever, an essay in the back of all the comics saying Barry was coming back, and this was always the day I got the DC Comics. What I was always going to do was my idea was to bring back Hal Jordan and Barry Allen. I call BS because that was the case. There were all these interviews back then from Comic Cons and online where people would ask to bring Barry Allen back. Not a lot of people, but like some fans here and there. There wasn't this big outcry for it. There just wasn't. People loved Wally. Most people just knew Barry as someone in the past. He died in 1985 or 86. And he would tell people like to flat out get over it, that like Wally was all this stuff. But what happened was Green Lantern Rebirth was a hit. And he wanted to mirror that with the same creative team. It's kind of ridiculous that they did that. So I don't really think at that point he really had. I don't even think Dan really hates Wally West. I think that first of all he likes he likes the controversy of having people talk about him in the books. It really is. It's like showmanship. It is a good way to get people to buy the books. There's no one there at DC doing that now.
No,
and no one's talking about the books. But I don't think he really hates the character. I don't think he hates any character. I think that he definitely now, because of the success of Green Lantern Rebirth and some things like the initial arc of New 52, I think that he thinks that the main characters, the Silver Age versions, the ones that were popular back at that point, need to be front line and center. And I think that he knows, particularly with Wally West, that he's a threat to Barry Allen, popularity-wise, which is why Wally was first taken off the board when Barry came back. Then when he was brought back, basically they tried to humiliate him with Heroes in Crisis and make him a villain. I think he looks at Wally more as a threat to the throne for Barry. That if Wally was around and allowed to be as cool as he's always been, people wouldn't have taken his pushing Barry Allen on them. Look, I mean, if you look at the hardcover for Flash Rebirth, and even reading interviews, but in the hardcover, I believe it is where Ethan Van Sciver gives insight onto the Flash costume that he had a design for Wally. Not the one we ultimately ended up with what Wally's wearing now, but there's sketches of some awful ones, right? That's because people in upper management, which he's not saying it, but Dan Didio was in charge, particularly told them that Wally couldn't look as cool as Barry.
Wow, I never heard that before. Wow.
He's a threat. He was a threat to him. So you see one of these costumes is awful. I'm surprised they were allowed to get the costume they got in, which is basically Wally's 90s costume with the nose guard. So I think, honestly, I just think that he was more of like a threat to Barry, which honestly, I think a lot of the speeches were, which is why they got rid of all of them doing the New 52,
Exactly. And as we get closer to wrapping this up, I do want to say, there's a couple of things I do want to say before we wrap this up, but thank you for that summation, Keith. That was a really, and I just hope that somebody hears this at DC and takes your Jay Garrick proposal.
Me too.
Because it'd be such a freaking cool comic book.
Jeremy Adams, if you're listening, please.
Yeah, Jeremy, please.
Do it.
Wally West's first appearance canonically. Is that the correct way of saying that? I guess so. What the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah, was Flash Volume 1, number 110. Cover date December, January 59. On sale date October 20th, 1959. I've said this before in a previous podcast, and I want to reiterate this again because this is very important. And I hope Dan Didio's listening too. Wally West predates the entire Marvel universe. That includes the Fantastic Four. So when we're talking about iconic characters, and you Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Captain America, Iron Man, the Hulk, Thor, you got to throw Wally West in there along with Barry, of course. But Wally is a seminal character of the Silver Age. And he's been around since then, and I hope he's around for a hell of a lot longer. And I just hope that Jeremy Adams, we've heard he's got some cool stuff planned. And we also know, Keith, and maybe you could speak to this, that that Geoff Johns has some cool stuff planned for the near future of DC Comics, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking. I think Geoff Johns, some of his best work is on his JSA series, both volumes that he did, and he's coming back and doing a JSA one shot, a JSA 12-issue maxi series, which I'm hoping goes into an ongoing at some point, and a Stargirl miniseries. And most people know Stargirl's a part of the JSA, and they're going to tie in, a lot in there. So I'm hoping those all kind of lead into more books with him. I would be thrilled if Geoff ran with the greatest superheroes of the golden age and did his best with them. I would be extremely happy if we had Johns there, Adams on the Flash family, and Mark Waid in the super books. I'd be a happy guy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. That would make me very happy because there's not much from DC right now besides the stuff you just mentioned. That's making me very happy. So yeah,
Flash, World's Finest, Blue and Gold,
Mm-hmm.
and when these books come out, I can almost say they're going to be good. I mean, even Johns at his worst is still putting out some pretty decent work.
Exactly. So it's before we wrap up, any recommendations for our audience, Keith?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm gonna steal one from you and
Okay,
say,
fine.
as always the Jeremy Adams Flash run.
Yep.
It's fantastic. It is up there. It feels very much like Mark Waid's Flash run.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun book with a ton of heart. And starting in, I think, end of December and early January, the book is going to go to being published twice a month, and they're going to do this story arc, the first Flash event called 1 Minute War or 60-second War. I think it's 1 Minute War, where basically a army of aliens that have their spaceships and weapons powered by the Speed Force invade Earth, and the whole war happens between a minute with Wally and the rest of the speedsters fighting these aliens off. And I can't recommend that enough.
That's very cool.
And it's not related to comics, but I would also like to recommend an older movie I caught on HBO Max recently. It's like 6-7 years old, I think. It's called Whiplash, not comic book related, only in the sense that the actor who played J. Jonah Jameson in the Spider-Man movies is J.K. Simmons. He's in it, and it's a story about a college drum student in this jazz band, and his instructor / teacher composer guy who's to say J.K. Simmons is tough on his students is an understatement. It's borderline abusive, but it is such a complex story. And when you see what the characters really are trying to what his character is trying to do and what he's trying to teach, well, be it in a kind of a messed up way, I think, Joe, I think you'd love it. It's so
Sounds good. We're going to check it out.
I watched it twice in 1 week because I like it so much. That and a movie I recommended to Joe recently, Last Night in Soho. It's that's more of a suspense / horror movie. Not really horror, but suspense movie that I think everyone would love if you get a chance. I'd recommend those 3 things right now.
Yeah, it's a great period piece. It's got some great music in from the '60s. Great soundtrack. I really enjoyed that film very much, very much. Thank you for sending me that DVD.
Oh, you're welcome. I knew you would love it. I'm like you. I love '60s music and imagery, and I think it's fun. Oh, speaking of that, I don't want to ramble, but another recommendation I saw in the theater Sunday was "Don't Worry, Darling," which is another movie thriller, but not with the gore of Last Night in Soho.
No.
A thriller, but again, takes place in a 1950s, 1960s, kind of imagery world with, and also comic related because the lead actress in it is Florence Pugh, who plays in the MCU as Natasha Romanoff's sister.
Okay, cool.
So those two movies were comic related.
There you go.
That was really good. Again, it's a mystery thriller, so that's still in the theaters, but I think it'll be on HBO Max in about a month.
Cool. I will definitely check it out. I have a couple of recommendations. I'm going to recommend, since we've been talking about Geoff Johns and his run on Wally West, I'd recommend you go out and buy all the trades. But if you can only buy one or get one or find it on a non-sponsor sponsor, what the hell's it called again? It's Hoopla, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I would recommend the Flash Iron Heights by Johns and Van Sciver. It's just it's a beautiful comic book. I'm looking at it now. Back in the day, it was $5.95, but God, what would this be today? About $15.95. But I'm sure it's on. Yeah. It's on. You can find it on Amazon or my favorite place to find these things, cheapgraphicnovels.com. And I have in front of me the Silver Age Flash Omnibus Volume 1, which includes that Flash 110, which includes, of course, the first appearance of Wally West, where he visits his uncle, and his aunt takes him to visit his uncle, and boom, lightning strikes twice, and there you go. So it's great. It's Carmine Infantino, inked by Joe Giella, inked by the great Murphy Anderson, written by Gardner Fox, and all the crazy, silly stories by John Brome. Great stuff. So I highly recommend that. And Keith, I recommended this last night on one of our sports shorts, and I'm going to recommend it again because I saw episode 5 of The Sandman yesterday.
Oh.
And I told Chris this. I'm going to tell you the same thing. It is one of the single best hours of television I have ever seen.
That was the one I think I told you about. I think that would hook you. That had, especially.
I'm getting chills just talking about it. It's so freaking amazing, so well written. The actress who plays Death, she's amazing. It's just a beautiful story that just pulls you in and makes you think. And what an incredible hour of television.
Her explanations of why it doesn't make her sad what she does.
Yeah,
so moving. And so well done. And also, I feel so well paced in the series because the episode before that was insanity. And you needed something with heart.
Yes, you needed something with heart and a lot less blood.
A lot less blood.
Yeah, and here's an episode about death, and there's no blood in it. And it's very interesting.
Right, and then half the story is about his friend.
Right, yeah. Yes.
Heart.
Yeah.
If I had to tell anyone who just didn't want to watch the entire series.
Just watch an episode.
Just watch that one, please.
Yeah, it's like a feature film, right?
Yeah.
In that sense. Yeah. It's a standalone, great. You'll spend, I think it was 58 minutes. It's the best 58 minutes you'll ever spend watching television.
That's my favorite episode of the series so far. That and they did an 11th episode after it ended. They did like a bonus episode. Mm-hmm. That one too, but it's a close one. But no, that one, I'm with you. Episode 5 or that episode was ridiculous. It was amazing. It was, it moved me. I get chills even thinking
Very
about
moving. Very moving. Beautifully written, directed, and acted. Just production values, everything, just gorgeous. The way it was filmed.
I'm glad you liked it.
I loved it a lot. So, Keith, we're gonna bring this Joe's Comics Corner. Every time I say that, my head swells even more. To a close. Thank you, James and Chris, for giving me this title. So we're gonna bring this to a close, and I want to thank you, Keith, for being our resident Flash expert, all things Barry and all things Wally and all things Geoff Johns. This was a great hour and 23 minutes, folks.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I love doing these. I love being a guest on the show. It's so much fun, and I can talk about comics forever, but particularly the Flash and Wally West. Well,
James gave me an idea today. We're going to get you back in a future episode. We're going to get Jack back, and you and Jack are going to inform myself, James, and Chris, and our audience about the convoluted history of Hawkman.
I would love that.
That'd be a tour de force. If you can pull that off, you're the best.
It'll be a whole 15 minutes just to figure out how to pronounce Qatar and Carter, or both Carter.
Shira, and whatever the heck it is. Yeah, exactly. So, folks, if you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, we have a huge catalog of episodes you can check out wherever you get your podcasts. Secret Origins of Mint-Conditioned Comics. You can email us your criticisms and or your likes at secretoriginsmc.com, at Gmail, at Gmail. I never get that right. Or just on our Facebook group, Secret Origins of Mint Condition. I wrote Mint Tune there. I'm looking at my handwriting. This is great. Or Instagram. So reach out and just let us know what you think. We greatly appreciate it. So thank you once again. And Keith, thanks again. This has been a great hour and a half.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Yeah.